It's time for Independent Book Project number 1. Step 1 was to choose the book, Step 2 was to read the book, and now today we're going to talk about Step 3, creating the project. We're going to focus on this. In this IBP, we're going to focus on examining one character from the book that you read from the 5th grade core list. What do you think of when I say describe the character? Maybe you think, what does the character look like? What does the character wear? How does the character act? But can you think of anything else? There are even more ways to think about a character. How about what role the character plays in the story? How about what type of character he or she is? What the heck am I talking about? Well, when we think about a role that the character plays, two roles that a character might play are the role of protagonist or the role of antagonist. The protagonist is the central person in the story and is often referred to as the story's main character. He or she is faced with a conflict that must be resolved. The antagonist is the character, or sometimes not a character at all, a thing or a situation that represents the opposition against the protagonist. In other words, the antagonist is an obstacle that the protagonist has to overcome. So perhaps the character that you're going to write about in your book is a protagonist or an antagonist. Maybe not, but maybe. All characters have to be, are some special type of character. All characters are either dynamic or static. If they're dynamic, they're a character who changes during the course of the story or novel. The change or outlook of the character is a permanent change. A dynamic character is sometimes called a developing character. A static character is a character that remains pretty much the same throughout the story or novel. Whatever else is going on in the story doesn't really change the static character's outlook on life, his or her personality, how he or she thinks, etc. In addition to being either a dynamic or static character, all characters have to be either round or flat characters. Round characters are well-developed characters who demonstrate a whole bunch of different traits. If you had to describe your character and you came up with a long list of descriptions, then more than likely you're talking about a round character. A flat character, on the other hand, reveals only one, maybe two personality traits throughout the whole story, and those traits don't change. Two more types of characters that we have that your character may or may not be are what we call foil or stock characters. Foil characters are characters that are used to enhance another character through contrast. Cinderella is a foil character. Her grace and beauty and kindness, as opposed to her nasty, self-centered stepsisters, are a clear illustration of how a foil character can be developed against another character. Stock characters are a very special kind of flat character, and they're instantly recognizable by readers because of their stereotypical behavior. Think of the ruthless businessman, the dumb blonde, or the dumb jock. How many times have those characters appeared in books that we've read? Can characters be more than one type? Absolutely they can. Let's go back to the Cinderella example. Cinderella is most definitely a dynamic character who changes throughout the story. She's also a well-developed character. We could think of a long list of descriptors for Cinderella. And as we mentioned already, she's a foil character. It just so happens that Cinderella is actually also the protagonist of the story Cinderella. But not every character would be able to be described with so many types and so many roles. Now that you know a little bit about some roles characters can play and some types of characters that exist in novels, you can start thinking about the character in the core book you read for this IBP. Your job is to analyze this character. You really need to think about your character. And I gave you some handouts in class to help you get started. Those handouts will be what you can use for the pre-writing step of the writing process. In other words, use those handouts to organize your thoughts about what kind of character the character that you're going to write about is. The next part of your project, and a very important part, is writing. You're going to need to write at least a paragraph. Of course, you may want to write more. Your job in that paragraph is to describe your character. A good paragraph starts with an attention-grabbing opening sentence. The next part of the paragraph includes the details that support your opening sentence. Your details must let Miss Gehring and I know whether your character is round or flat. All characters are either round or flat. You must also let us know if your character is dynamic or static. You have to support your position with specific examples from the story. You can't just tell us that they're a round, dynamic character. You have to point to specific examples in the story that let us know why your character is round or why your character is dynamic. Here's an example of a couple good sentences about Harry Potter in the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. In the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, the reader meets many different types of characters. Harry is the main character in this book, and he is most certainly a dynamic character. He changes from a shy, timid boy with no friends in the beginning of the book to a young man with many close friends. Harry also changes from a boy who doesn't understand his magical powers to a young wizard capable of stopping Voldemort. So, in these first few sentences, I've identified Harry as a dynamic character, and then I give evidence from the story about what makes him dynamic. I give evidence of a change. He changed from a shy, timid boy with no friends to a young man with many close friends. I give a second piece of evidence when I said that Harry also changes from a boy who doesn't understand his magical powers to a young wizard who's fighting Voldemort. Of course, my paragraph would continue with details about whether Harry Potter is a round or a flat character. I might choose to mention he's also the protagonist of the story and give evidence of why the reader knows that. Harry's not a foil character or a stock character, so I wouldn't include anything about those types of characters in my paragraph. When you're writing your paragraph, you'll want to do a rough draft of your paragraph or paragraphs, and then do some revising and editing. Eventually, you'll come up with the finished draft. Just FYI, I want you to turn in those rough drafts too, so I can see how hard you worked on this. I want to see the process your writing went through. Your final paragraph must or can include the following. And if you're looking at this screen, the musts are in red, the cans are in green. You must include a good opening sentence. You must tell me if your character is round or flat, and you must give at least one example. It must tell me if your character is dynamic or static, and you must give me one example for that. It can tell me if your character is a protagonist or antagonist, and you can give me an example. And it can tell me if your character is a foil or stock character, and you can tell me why. Your paragraph, of course, must contain a closing sentence. Your final paragraph must be typed 12 font Times New Roman, and your page must be set up like all of our pages in Humanities with your class number and then your name and date across the top. The next line should have the subject centered in between the name and the date. The subject line for this should be IBP number 1. After you write your paragraph, we want you to share what you wrote about your character by creating one of 3 things: a visual display of the information, which will be a Wordle, an oral presentation of your information where you can dress up as the character and talk about yourself, or a digital report where you can record yourself talking through the use of a character like an avatar in a Voki or with the use of a picture in a Blabberize. To learn more about the Wordle, the Blabberize, and the Voki, you're going to want to see videos that I made and have posted on the Live Binder. There's one on Blabberize, there's one on Wordles, and there's one on Vokis. You can listen to me talking about Blabberize, Vokis, and Wordles on YouTube, so go ahead and give it a try. So that's basically it for IBP number 1. The first part of the project is for you to write your paragraph or paragraphs. Your second part of the project is to take the information that you wrote about and come up with a digital or live or oral or visual presentation in the form of a Voki, a Wordle, a Blabberize, or a live presentation. We'll have some time in tutorial to work on these independent book projects, and you'll have to work on the independent book projects independently at home. If you have any questions, you can talk to me in school, post something on Edmodo, or send me an email.